Welcome to the Friday Show, presented by Woodbine, where we're headed into closing weekend for the meet. We've got a pair of stakes races for Ontario-sired runners on Saturday's card, followed by the Grade 3 Valedictory Stakes on Sunday's closing day. That card's also going to have mandatory payouts for the Jackpot High Five and the Power Pick 6, so get your bankrolls ready. First post is at 12:55 Eastern. I'm Bloodstock editor Joe Nevills, joined today by editor-in-chief Natalie Voss and news editor Chelsea Hackbarth. Today, we're going to be discussing a topic that we've been following on the website for a few days now. There's a hearing taking place with the British Horseracing Authority regarding jockeys' room bullying, with female rider Bryony Frost detailing patterns of threatening behavior and harassment from male jockey Robbie Dunne on the track and in the jocks' room. We wanted to have a discussion about what this case means in the scope of Britain's national hunt scene, but more importantly, on the culture of horse racing in general. Chelsea, for those not familiar with the case, can you give us a quick rundown of what's going on?
Sure. So there are 7 charges against Robbie Dunne, and they deal with, I believe, 3 race dates specifically in 2020. But there has been established a pattern of bullying since approximately 2017, including explicit language, nakedness in front of her, and physical threats. So it's definitely been hard to watch.
Mm-hmm. And what is kind of the scope of this? What does a hearing like this mean, sort of within the scope of the BHA, the national hunt in Great Britain, and really the culture in general?
Well, I mean, for Bryony to bring these charges, she's about 10 years younger than Robbie, and she's also recently been more successful than he has on the circuit. So for her, and I believe she's the most successful female jumps rider in Britain at the moment. So she's in a position of leadership just based on that. But for her to have to bring these charges against him, gosh, no one has supported her. None of her fellow jockeys have supported her. It's taken almost 14 months since she brought the charges for it to even come to a hearing. There were leaks from the British Horseracing Authority to certain media members ahead of the hearing, and it's been poorly managed by the British Horseracing Authority in the first place. And then so now they're kind of really in the hot seat as opposed to how it would be otherwise. But they have to get this right. There's no excuse for this kind of behavior in 2021. You don't threaten people ever, I don't think, in whether they're irrespective of gender. You just don't. It's not done. And somebody has to be in charge of policing that. And here it's the British Horseracing Authority, and the hearing isn't over, but they have to make the right call here.
Mm-hmm. Among the threats that Robbie Dunne made to Bryony Frost, mentioned that he was going to put her in the rail. Said some things that were very specific on what he was going to do to her if she didn't do what he said. Very specific language on this. Can you discuss a little bit more on just some of the things that he specifically said?
He said he was going to put her in the wing, so the side of the jumps, which is a solid, immovable object. You would be on a horse running at speed over a jump, and for the rider to then land in the wing of the jump, there's obviously serious injury threat right there. Mm-hmm. It's not where I want to be.
Yeah,
that's for sure. And what she said, some of the things she said were, it wasn't a joke. He didn't say it. He wasn't angry when he made that threat. He was very calm, very quiet, and very direct in his tone, which is why it was so scary and why she finally decided she needed to speak up. Bryony's dad is a champion hunt jockey as well, a former champion hunt jockey. And he always told her, you know, this is sort of the culture. This is how it is. Just keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, and do your job. But she decided when that threat was made that that was an escalation of Dunne's pattern and it wasn't going to get any better. So she decided she was in the position to speak out. And she's really been ostracized by all the other female jockeys, and many of the male jockeys as well. Tom Scudamore, who's another top national hunt jockey over there, used to be friends with her and now has sort of ostracized her as well. And it's just, I don't understand why in horse racing that's considered acceptable. I mean, you saw a sort of similar scenario in the gymnastics realm when the girls spoke up against the male trainer, and all the girls were, you know, glorified in the media, and you know, all the other young gymnasts celebrated them, whereas in horse racing everyone's saying, well, gee, why would you complain to the authorities about that? That's normal. Well, why is it normal?
Well, and you also kind of tend to wonder, there presumably were officials in the room for some of these altercations that she describes. There certainly were other jockeys around. So it's kind of culturally normalized to the point that he didn't feel like he had to hide what he wanted to say to her. You know, we should say that he denies all but one of the charges that are against him. And in that case, you know, speaking specifically about the conversation about putting her into the wings, he disputes that he said, "I'm going to hurt you." And he agrees that he said, "I'm going to put you in a wing if you interfere with my horse again," because all of this seemed to be based on his perception that she wasn't riding in a manner that was safe. I really don't know enough about the specific races or what each of them saw from their perspective on their horses to judge whether or not that's the case. But I thought that distinction in particular was almost kind of laughable. Like, no, I didn't say I was going to hurt you. I said I was going to do something that would result in your being hurt. But, you know, other people obviously heard that at the time, and not just other jockeys, but presumably there would have been some clerk of scales, some BHA official, somebody else was around, and didn't find that over the line to the point that they were willing to bring charges themselves. It sort of took until she complained about it. And, you know, you were sort of touching off on the thing of her being ostracized as a result of having reported. I think that there's this concept, as far as I understand it, never having been in a jock's room before, there's this concept that, like, well, there's going to be competitive disagreements and they're going to blow up at each other, and that's just sort of how it is, and that's just kind of fine, and they've got to get all this out of their system somehow. And I'm kind of looking at it going, you know, if someone's going to come to blows with somebody else or physically threaten when we get back out on the track, I'm going to do this specific thing to you. Are you really expecting that in every single situation, someone's just going to drop all that in 10 minutes and you're going to go get on horses and there's not going to be an opportunity arise that they might see a chance for some sort of physical revenge over this issue they have? And can we really sort of continually allow discussions like that, even if they are really just words, which is sort of his take on the whole thing? Well, I was just saying these things. Well, you know, even if that's the case, you sort of don't know when somebody's actually going to act on it. And that's going to put everyone else at risk. And that just doesn't seem like something that should be tolerated.
Chelsea, you mentioned earlier, I believe it was Tom Scudamore, as one of the people that sort of distanced himself from Bryony Frost. And he mentioned in one of the stories that I saw quoted that he would have reported Robbie Dunne earlier. He noticed all this stuff himself, but it's just something that sort of happened every 3 days. It was just sort of par for the course for him. And I feel like that's another thing that sort of, I've written on this myself, that there are a lot of enablers in horse racing. There are a lot of people who allow things to happen because it's the way they've always happened. And that, and once that pattern sort of established, there isn't a whole lot of inertia to stop it. I'm curious to get both of your thoughts on just that sort of culture of inertia when it comes to bad behavior.
horse racing is a sport that prides itself as the only sport in the world where men and women compete on equal terms. And I think that because of that, we have a responsibility to do better. And in this case, obviously that hasn't been done. And I think the reason it hasn't been done is like you said, that it's just sort of so ingrained that this is the way things have always been done. This is the way that they are. Why would you speak up? Why would you make that change? I mean, it's not just the jockey's room. It goes all the way down the level from hot walker to groom to exercise riders, and female trainers. We've had stories about them, having difficulties finding their way early on in the game. And that there's a point where maybe gender isn't a part of it, but at the same time, when these men, and again, it's not all men, but there are certainly a fair number that feel it is their right to call you names or to say things about your body or to say basically whatever they want right to your face, and no one else seems to have a problem with it. I don't know what that tells the younger people that are coming, that may want to join horse racing in the future. But if it were me, that would be a reason to stay out of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would be very easy to say in this case that this bullying was jockey to jockey and not man to woman, because jockeys do get in altercations with each other, male jockeys against each other all the time. But it's sort of hard to ignore that, like, he used a lot of really gendered and sexist and sexually charged language in what he had to say to her, according to her. And, that makes you wonder about really, why was he that angry? Was it because she was female, or was it because she was competing against him, or was it some amalgamation of both? Like you said, certainly seeing somebody else using that kind of language and getting away with it doesn't really make you feel comfortable if you're also female, because you're thinking, well, okay, I'm here too. What's going to come next for me? The other sort of piece of this, I think, too, is that, like, jockeys, not specifically in like jocks rooms altercations, although that's true there, I would think a little bit. I feel like they're very often sort of rewarded, or at least encouraged not to say much about really anything. Being independent contractors, they can't say too much about a trainer or a trainer's horses or the condition a trainer's horses are in, because they can't afford to get fired, or whether it's for morning work or afternoon work. And I think that maybe similarly, if they've got to kind of deal with each other in these very close proximity sort of situations, and they have to deal with maybe somebody else's anger issues or somebody else's substance issues that might impair their judgment, they don't really want to become the target of that guy. So I think a lot of times it's sort of encouraged to just sort of quietly go along with a lot of different things that they experience or witness, because they feel like they can't say anything, because there are so many sort of instant possible ramifications with their employment situations. And I don't sort of know what the best way is to fix that, because it's partially just how the industry is structured, where jockeys are free agents and not kind of contracted to one stable, where they would have a little bit more freedom to speak about what they experience elsewhere. But I think that really is a major problem, because they know and they see a lot of things, they experience a lot of things. We really could use their perspective. We really could use their freedom to speak out in a lot of different kinds of contexts, including this one. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be what's encouraged, or that doesn't seem to be what's possible. So I think that's something that we really need to think about.
And that's something go ahead. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Sorry. I would qualify that just a little bit. It's not that you're not supposed to speak out at all. It's that you're not supposed to speak out to an authority, right? Like an outside authority. A perfect example of this was another female jockey told Bryony that she should have just punched Dunne.
Right.
and Dunne's response was, well, what good is that going to do me? Well, it would have gotten him off your back, but would it? And then at that point, is she any better than him? Well, no. Let's not. I mean, we had the jockey fight, what was it, Gulfstream in January, and they both got, I believe, fines. I don't think they got days for that, but definitely fines. You know, the maximum penalty here that Dunne could face is 3 years ban from the sport. And again, it'll be up to the hearing panel to determine what level of punishment is fair. But he's 36 years old. A 3-year ban, that would be the end of his career. So again, I'm glad I'm not the one that has to make the call on what's fair. But I'm also super pleased that there is a strength of leadership in a female jockey. Apparently not in the US, but certainly overseas. There is one who's willing to stand up and say, this is not acceptable. This is not normal. It should not be allowed to continue. And I really hope that other racing jurisdictions, both here and overseas, pay attention to whatever the hearing panel decides. This is something that's not going to go away. It's going to become more and more prevalent, I think, in this age of social media bullying and all these things that are possible between two people. And I think that we have to think of some creative ways to have new rules and new ways of policing these types of things.
You mentioned that a lengthy suspension could be a potential career, ender for an older rider. And I've heard that defense used with a few other people who have done heinous things, violated major rules. And my thought is always, so what? These are people who have done things that are above the fold for, bad acting. Shouldn't we want them out of the business? Shouldn't we want them, at the very least, discouraged from coming back? When it comes to ending someone's career, I really don't feel like that should be as big of a deterrent for lauding a larger punishment than it seems to have been so far. This has been for this particular rider, this has been a long established pattern of, misogynistic acts, threatening acts. And if he's gone, do I necessarily feel bad? No. I think he's given himself plenty of opportunities to right the ship, and he's only gone harder into the iceberg.
To be fair, I would actually disagree with you there, Joe. I think that's a little bit more of a pessimistic outlook than I would take on this. He hasn't been told that his behavior is wrong. Nobody's ever punished him for it. Why should his career have to end when he's never been punished? I think that take negates the possibility that people can learn from their actions and get better. Is that overly optimistic? Perhaps. But I don't know that I want to be in the position of saying, you are hopeless. There's no shot you're ever going to learn from your mistakes and get better. I don't want to ever be put in that kind of position. I think that there is a chance that everyone is redeemable at some level. But that's more a theoretical issue. That's deeper than this show, maybe.
Well, it's not like we've seen him yet say, oh, turns out I shouldn't have said some of those things. Like, so far it's like, well, I didn't actually deliver on any of these threats, so it's fine, which doesn't really encourage me that it's going to be very easy to help him understand that, the point isn't really whether you end up delivering on it after a long period of time. The point is that the person who's receiving that, sort of harassment from you really doesn't know what you are and aren't going to do. So it's hard for me to imagine he's going to find it very easy to put himself in somebody else's shoes. Of course, he might also just not be willing to say that he could have done anything wrong because he's still hoping not to get suspended for 3 years. And that's part of the legal game, I guess. But yeah, as a devout rule follower, that has always driven me crazy. Of just I assume that I am supposed to follow rules, because if I don't get to pick my punishment, and it might be very bad. And that's why you just shouldn't do something that could result in, a longer, ill-timed suspension. And so when somebody says, oh, but this isn't really this is bad timing for me to be suspended during Breeders' Cup week as a jockey, or this is a long time for me as a trainer to go away, or this is, you know, there was a federal, one of the federal, business. Right. Well, exactly, one of the, there was also one of the federal defendants was intended to start his prison sentence, I think around this time of year. And his lawyer said, well, could you give him until after Christmas? And it's like, I just assume if I did something that resulted in me going to jail, I wouldn't get to pick when it happened. Although the judge said, yeah, sure, let him go in January. But
not only jail, but like federal court.
Yeah,
jail,
federal.
Big boy jail.
Yeah. So that sort of thing does tend to drive me a little bit nuts, because I'm thinking, well, you know, those of us who try not to run afoul of major rules are doing it because we figure it could be very bad for us if we don't. But, you know, I would like to think that Chelsea has a point, and maybe people can learn. I just have yet to see a lot of evidence of it.
No, I wouldn't say there's a lot of evidence in it, especially in a sport like ours. But I am ever hopeful that that some of this culture is able to be changed. And, you know, that's one of the things that Bryony said early on that really stuck with me is, you know, this isn't a personal vendetta, her against Robbie Dunne. This is her trying to make the world notice that there's an issue and trying to change it. This is a jockey's room culture issue, as opposed to a horse racing culture issue. It's not just one girl against one guy.
Mm-hmm. One more topic I want to bring up before we wrap up for today, and it's sort of to wheel back around to something you mentioned earlier, is just the way that others in the business reacted to Bryony's case here. And, you know, kind of shut her out, closed her out. And that's not necessarily something that's unique to the jocks room. This is something that is, you know, you can point to any aspect of the horse racing industry, and you can find that it's really not terribly encouraged to, you know, quote unquote whistleblow, quote unquote rat. Horse racing is really one big small town. And it seems like not only does it hurt you if you say that, like it sort of makes you a risk to get hired by other people, because they'll think, oh, what if they do the same to me? Is there something that can be done to solve that you think that could be done to solve that particular mindset in the thoroughbred business as a whole?
Way to go with the hard-hitting questions, Joe.
I do what I can. When I host, I try to make it count.
I haven't gotten around to that part of thinking about it yet, to be honest. Off the top of my head, that's really hard. When I was still working on the backstretch, I don't know that I would have been willing to talk about this kind of thing publicly, just for fear of, well, what am I going to do? Am I ever going to get hired again? Mm-hmm. And so for me, who was working as a groom and a really, really terrible exercise rider, I can't imagine what it must be like as a jockey where you're, you know, it's so based on your daily performance. Natalie, help.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the solution is either, except that I do think it kind of goes back to the independent contractor thing, not just for jockeys, but for grooms, for exercise riders, trainers somewhat too. I mean, like they're the ones hiring a lot of people underneath them, but they're also kind of reliant on patching together, you know, lists of owners to keep them employed. So I think that kind of the downside of the modern racing system is that, yeah, you always have to be worried about who might fire you for something you might say or do or not say or do. And, you know, I sort of, it's somebody who's done a lot of feature writing on like historical racing, not HHR, but like racing back in the, you know, 30s, 40s, 50s. A lot of that was different for a lot of different reasons, but one of the ways that the sport was very different is you had these wealthy owners who did this for sport rather than profit, for one thing, but who also kind of had their trainer and their jockey. And as long as those people kind of got along with that one owner, they could feel a little more comfortable, I would think, not having been there, and not having to worry constantly about, you know, breaking ranks to whistleblow or opine on something or whatever the issue might have been. You had to keep one person happy instead of everybody. And it seems like there were certainly a lot of problems with racing back in the day too, but one of the advantages probably was that system did allow people a little more security. And I don't think we're probably going back to that anytime soon, unfortunately. But, you know, that I think really comes down to the financial structure of it, the way it is now. Unfortunately, I don't have any suggestions on what to do with that, but I think that might be the root of a lot of it.
The more I think about it, the more I think maybe the sport horse world has a pretty good head start on this with their Safe Sport program. Not only do all trainers and professionals have to go through specific training that takes you through, okay, this is abuse, this is not okay, these are the regulations, this is what you can say, this is what you cannot say, this is what you can do, this is what you cannot do. Not only that, but there's an anonymous way to report actions that would violate the Safe Sport mandate. Is it perfect? No, but it's a darn good start, and it's certainly better than the, well, just deal with it and close your eyes and pretend it's not happening.
Very important subject, one that we'll be keeping an eye on the Pollock Report website as this hearing continues. Thanks to you both for sharing this, being on with us, and stick around for our Woodbine Star of the Week.
Leading the field in the Kennedy Road is Clayton by a length and a half. Richie's in the house. Tapper to win the inside from Smoke and Jay. Super Stonehenge has come up on the outside of Pink Lloyd, who started to come through, spearing up in the center and into the clear now. Pink Lloyd is coming around the outside as they corner. Clayton turns in front of Richie's in the house, and now taking a shot at them is the mighty Pink Lloyd down the outside. Pink Lloyd's within a length of the leader, and down the outside Super Stonehenge. Pink Lloyd coming. It's Clayton joined by Pink Lloyd on the outside. Pink Lloyd and Richie's in the house. Pink Lloyd's in front. Pink Lloyd, monumental again, has won his final race in glory. Second, Richie's in the house. Clayton is third, and then Tapper to win. A fairy tale ending in 1:8:84. We salute the mighty Pink Lloyd.
Star of the week, star of the year, star of a lifetime. It's Pink Lloyd. What else do I need to say? The 7-time Sovereign Award winner put a cap on a certain first-ballot Canadian Hall of Fame career with a win in the Grade 2 Kennedy Road Stakes on November 27th at Woodbine. Pink Lloyd retires with 29 wins and 38 starts and more than $1.8 million in earnings. He was Canada's Horse of the Year in 2017, and he's probably got the inside track to win another one in 2021. And maybe even a Vox Populi award. We'll see what happens. We're almost to the end of the Woodbine meet, but the leading owner, trainer, and jockey standings are all wrapped up, so just a quick congrats to them. Jockey Kazushi Kimura, congrats to you. Trainer Mark Cassie, owner Bruno Schickendanz, fantastic job in 2021. That'll do it for this week's episode of the Friday Show. Thanks to Woodbine for their support throughout the meet. Thank you to Natalie and Chelsea for being on with us this week, and we'll see you next time.